Well, thank you so much for joining me. And for those of you watching, and I know a lot of people are going to replay this, I invited you on because we crossed paths, I guess, on LinkedIn originally. And I really was appreciative of what you were seeing and recognizing in the horses you were working on and some of the, we'll say, everyday occurrences that maybe could have been avoided, if that's a good way to put it, based on results basically of how humans were interacting with the horse. So before we delve into that, maybe you can give just a little intro on who you are and what you do, and then we can just kind of discuss some of the common everyday things that you're seeing and where you're seeing these things come from training practices. So I'll pass this over to you.
Oh, firstly, thank you for inviting me on. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
No problem.
I'm a vet physio now, and I came to this sort of through quite a convoluted path. So began my career many years ago, more than I like to admit now,
Okay.
in racing. And it was back in the 90s, early 90s. I went from racing to work for some elite riders in multiple disciplines, through to riding schools, decided to do my British Royal Society training. And somewhere along that very long path, started to get quite uncomfortable with things that I was being asked to do, or I was participating in stuff I hadn't really questioned before. And a lot of it, you think back and think, oh, I even hate to admit that I did that now.
Yep.
Awful. So I broke away and I went to university and I started an equine science degree, just trying to find out more about the horse. And then I came back to the industry as an instructor, and began to teach people very results focused. If we were winning, if we were hitting the goals, it was great. But I'm surrounded by broken horses, physically, mentally unhappy, and there has to be a better way. I've always been obsessed with movement. There's just nothing nicer than watching a horse move well. And came off a youngster, did my back quite badly, had to come out of the industry for a bit to rest it, and thought, well, may as well use the time. So I went and I qualified as a vet physio, and then started to bring it all together. And actually, just you start asking questions. I discovered a few groups. One of my favorite pages that I found is Animal Behavior and Trauma Recovery Service on Facebook, who I very much credit to turning my view around. Actually, this is what I've been trying to find. This is why results don't last and horses are breaking, and there are things, everyday practices, things everyone does it. We've been doing it this way for years. Why aren't they working? What's happening? So very long, very convoluted path that led me to what I find can be quite an alienating standpoint of I'm not going to do it like that anymore.
Yes.
These aren't my words. For the life of me, I cannot remember who said them, but they are not my words. Somebody, again, a very beautifully written Facebook post of, I want my horse to be better because I ride it, not be better so I can ride it. Well, that's it. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think one of the things, because when you do this on a regular basis and you see a lot of horses, it can seem very obvious to you, the consistencies and the results of certain approaches, certain training methods, certain tactics. I'm sorry, the alarm's going off. It's always an adventure. So for you, it can seem very regular, but for we're going to say everyday horse owner who is starting to see maybe changes in their horse's body, or some things that their horse, isn't moving quite the same it was maybe a year or two ago, where do you even start? Because I find for a lot of people, as they start to question how they've been doing what they're doing, it can be really overwhelming. And of course, there's 50 million opinions out there on what the problem is and what the issue is and all that sort of thing. So how how do you guide people in a way that I'm going to say doesn't overwhelm them? Because that's really something that hinders people from making changes, is because they feel completely overwhelmed as they start to question, you know, what is going on with my horse? And then it's sort of like opening Pandora's box often, because as you know, the result of the physical is a combination of many, many things. It's not just that one time, that one incident. So how do you approach helping people?
When I normally get approached by somebody, it usually is a backhanded way or a comment. They're not actually even speaking to you. They're speaking at you about things. And the first thing, again, this is completely and utterly stolen. I had a conversation with a vet probably about 12 or 13 years ago. Incredible vet, absolutely love her, about a horse that was on my yard at the time, and obviously a private conversation. And I pulled her up and said, well, when does this start to become about what would the right thing for the horse? Like, when does this start to become a welfare issue? And she turned around to me and she said, I can only give my professional opinion on what I see in the time I visit the horse. And that's something that stuck with me. And it is something that I tell people all the time. If you are, whoever is in your team, we can only give our professional opinion based on the time that we see there in the horse. If it doesn't feel right, or question something, you should be able to say that to the professional that you're working with. That doesn't suit me and my horse. It doesn't work. It's not right. I don't like the feel of that. And if you can't, look for a new
that is
team.
so scary. That is so scary.
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but I mean, to question. I mean, I remember riding under the Olympians and the FEI coaches and all that. And
Agreed.
if you went against that, whatever the word was, I mean, that was like a challenge to everything. And you could very quickly become ostracized for even just questioning, even just like pondering out loud something.
Agreed.
It became this like you against them sort of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that's a massive problem people are facing in the industry, even with, your stablemates, your friends on the yard that are doing it the everyone does it way, that are doing it the old ways, and going, well, why aren't you jumping your 3-year-old yet? Why aren't you taking them out yet? And actually, you've got to stand up against them too. And we all know how vicious that world can be.
Oh, yeah.
It's horrible. It's a very hard standpoint to be in. But if you don't feel that you can have a conversation with the professional that is helping you guide your horse, maybe it's time to find a new one.
Exactly. And I think that's a big shift, but that's a huge shift. I mean, really, in the last 10 to 15 years, and I was over in the UK many moons ago and living and riding over there, and here in the US too, I feel that people are starting to feel that they can step back and make a decision for themselves. Whereas before, there was so many bullying tactics. Like, if you don't follow this strategy, you will not be successful. You cannot, we will not support you, or if you do something different than what we've agreed upon, then I will not work with you anymore. I mean, coming from the professional side of how they treated their students. And I mean, it was this total psychological, not good, healthy situation for so many people. For me, I'm finding that people really need support as they question, as they have the conversation, as they say something. And I find the more they can find other professionals like you who are saying, here's what your horse is telling you. Here's what your horse needs. It can really help bolster their confidence to go with what they're believing and not just blindly follow.
Absolutely.
Have you found that?
And from an instructor perspective, we don't teach our students critical thinking. We teach them, this is how you do it. So do it that way. And not actually, what do you think? You're on your horse. I can stand here from the ground and I can tell you X, Y, and Z, but what do you feel? Is it working? We don't teach critical thinking. And then, so you have somebody come and do some body work with your horse, for example, and they tell you, I'll do X, Y, and Z, and people just do it. Might not be the right thing.
Oh, I remember.
Pole work. Pole work. Do pole work. Loads and loads of pole work.
Absolutely.
Perhaps I shouldn't be doing that yet. And if you're feeling something, you can go, is this right now?
Absolutely. Okay, so that's the human side of things. So
Mm,
let's just talk for a few minutes about the horses. Let's say you've never seen a horse before, someone reaches out to you, you show up.
mm.
What are some things that you're noticing? Like, are there any trends or kind of more, because I kind of see things in waves, like as horses are moving or their body or the behaviors they're displaying to show their pain and their fear and their concern. Is there anything that you're seeing, we'll say, within the last few years where it's kind of a result of very specific, we'll say, training approaches, which, become popular based on the moment and whatever is
Mm.
going on social media. And then the horse is the one who pays the price. So what are some of the things you're seeing in horses nowadays that are coming up? And are there any kind of consistencies despite the breed, despite the discipline, that sort of thing?
Overall, and very umbrella term, I would say absolute confusion.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
need I need to stay in my box. I mustn't
Yes.
move outside. Do I move when that clicks? Do I do? They're not
Yes.
sure what to do,
Yeah.
and you either
Yeah.
get angry or you get shut
Yeah.
down.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and I'm in pain, so I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and then the flash is put on or push them through
Mhm.
X, Y, and Z,
More
and
equipment. Yeah.
yeah, and confusion is normally they
Yeah.
don't actually they lose trust in their own instincts,
Yeah.
so they
Yeah.
stop behaving like a horse, and
Oh,
then
yeah.
yeah, and actually you have to let them have that back because
Yeah.
they're incredibly intuitive. I like to call it the Black Beauty moment. I don't want to cross the bridge. Okay, well,
Yeah.
why? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
don't just push
Mm-hmm.
them across the bridge. Find out why they don't want to cross the bridge, but they lose that trust in themselves, and then it
Yes,
all gets very
absolutely.
angry.
Yes.
Everything
Oh,
gets
yeah.
angry.
Make them do it
Body, yeah,
because it's based on the human
yeah,
ego, right? What did you get that young horse to do?
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. What did you get? That I bought my young horse to do dressage, but they're 3. Don't
Yes.
specialize them
Oh,
so early,
yeah.
because you specialize too early, you drill the
Yeah.
horse too early, you create dysfunction in the body, you create problems. The horse should have a variety, absolute
Yeah.
variety.
So
Um,
another interesting thing, just a side note here, sorry, because this pops up so many different thoughts as you're talking. Um, Do you ever find, because I've experienced this, where someone is seeing something isn't working and they become open-minded and they're searching and they're trying and they're seeing changes in the horse and then they just completely second guess themselves because I'm going to say the old way is so deeply ingrained that despite seeing positive changes in the horses, maybe mental, emotional, physical behaviors and state and things that they're offering, the human resorts back to the safety of what they used to do, what they used to know. Because I see this a lot where despite the success, despite the feedback from the horse and them having these beautiful moments where they go, I've never seen my horse offer that and his try and his willingness. And then it's like they cannot commit. They cannot commit to the long-term potential change because it's shattering everything that what they knew and what their belief system was based on, we'll say. Have you found that at all?
Yes, and I so firmly feel, I'm obviously going to have my mind changed, that it's results focused. Doing it
Yeah,
right, taking it
yeah,
slow is exactly that.
yeah,
It might be 3-4 years before you see the result. Whereas if you do it the old way, you might see the result in 3 or 4 sessions. Doesn't
yes,
last, but
yes,
you see it quicker. Your horse might be cantering circles within 6 weeks of their ridden life, but 2 years down the
yeah.
line, you'll be dealing with that tendon injury because of that.
Yeah.
People want
And how many
results.
people aren't, but how many people aren't there 10 years down the road because this horse broke
True, yeah.
down, so let's hand him
Mm,
off. It'll become someone else's problem and you can always get a new one. I
yep,
mean that the rate,
absolutely. Yeah.
the turnover in horses is kind of incredible, which really
Mm,
reflects, I think, our perspective of I can buy it, I own it, it should perform, and if it doesn't, I get rid of it and I get a new one. And that doesn't matter on the
yeah,
discipline. I mean, really, we found that all the
agreed.
way
Yeah,
across the board.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're commodities. A lot of the time, the horse is a commodity.
yeah,
Um, and I so strongly feel that as professionals, actually, that responsibility lies with us. We're the trusted one. I call a
yes,
plumber in to fix my tap. I trust what they ask me to do.
yes.
So as professionals, you will have, to me, you will have long-term better relationships with your clients, taking it slow and doing it the right way for the horse.
Hmm.
but it's
Yeah.
so difficult to break. People want quick results, and you really
Yeah.
have to be quite strong to, I think,
Yeah.
stand up and go, I won't do it that way, and watch your client go to somebody who will.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
forever be baffled by that, by the not asking questions when you are effectively going through horses at the rate of knots and things aren't
Yeah.
working. The
Yeah.
why isn't brought into question. But then
Yeah.
again, it comes back full circle to the professional. Teach the critical
Yeah.
thinking.
So what do you think, I mean, I'm meeting more professionals, thankfully, nowadays who it seems like after a few decades are starting to kind of question things, which is a hard place to be because that means they're vulnerable. And especially in the
Mm,
horse world where it's all about being tough and strong and battling it out, type of
mm,
strong front in what you're portraying
mm.
often, that they're becoming vulnerable and going, maybe I need to step back. Maybe I've missed a few things. And are you seeing a shift in professionals? Because, I mean, I remember riding for years and no one ever looked at my equipment other than if it was strong enough to control the horse. I mean, nobody looked at body work. Nobody looked at diet. Nobody looked at turnout and social behavior. Nobody looked at anything. It was just about the ride of the moment.
Mm.
So are you finding that there is a shift in professionals that you're meeting who are starting to, I'm going to say, continue being actively educated despite their hands-on horse experience, that maybe they're widening their perspective of things that they're considering that are influencing what's going on?
I'm a 50-50 on that one. I would say for one, absolutely yes. Therefore the CPD is happening. The questions are being asked. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
seeing a change in the practices.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
actions speak louder to me.
Yeah.
Don't just
Yeah.
say you do it.
Yeah.
But it is a very lonely place to be, to stand there
Oh,
and go,
yeah.
actually, I
Yeah.
don't believe this is the right time for me to rehab your horse. I advise
Yeah.
you put them in field for a couple of years and let's talk afterwards, let them rest.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that actually that client is probably going to go to your competitor, for want of a better word, and
Mm-hmm.
have the job done,
Yeah.
whether it's successful or not. It is
Yeah.
not, it's quite a lonely place to be. So maybe
Yeah.
I'm judging too harshly by saying I'm not seeing it in the action, but actually when you have to make it your living, it's quite
Yes.
difficult to do. Like,
Yeah,
it is not an
absolutely.
easy. Mm. So
Yeah.
I'm probably judging quite harshly with that comment, but nonetheless.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, when I came back into horses a long time later, and in the sense of opening up a facility, I went to literally the middle of nowhere to open up a facility. There was no
Mm,
neighbors, there was no judgment, there was no
mm,
mainstream. And it was like,
mm.
if you remember the movie Field of Dreams, where they say, if you build it, they will come. It was
Yeah.
like that because I realized for my own well-being and the quality of what I wanted to do, I could not surround myself with the toxicity of so much of the critique and the judgment and the results based. And
Mm.
not that we didn't work towards things, not that there aren't successes, but the way in which we're measuring success has a completely different, I'm going to say, perspective. And it really is interesting to see in my local community, which is very, I'm going to say, old school. Very few people come to me. People travel from all over the world to come and work with me, but not local, because it's
Mm.
challenging the old way of how things were done and considering the horse, being empathetic to the horse. So
Mm.
on that note, as you show up to a facility and you have the owner who is trying to do best by their horse and they know they're up against, we'll say, the mainstream, and you're giving input, how do you have advice or suggestions for how they're able to find, I'm going to say, the balancing act of being able to do what they need to do? Let's say they don't have the option to move the horse to a different facility, and so they have to stay where they're at despite whatever the culture is. Do you have advice for owners who are trying to do better by their horse and as they're searching, as they're learning, and their horse is experiencing different things without letting the other judgment or the other comments or the other whatever override their good intentions? Like what advice do you give owners that you meet?
It's a really difficult question to answer because everyone is so different and the environments are
Mm-hmm.
also different.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority part, one of the nicest things about working for myself is that I can politely and selectively choose who I'm going to work with.
Absolutely.
Um, but effectively, I find the smile and nod technique is the best. Listen,
Yeah. Yeah.
engage, and
Yeah.
then whoosh, and walk away with what you don't want. If you
Yeah.
don't listen, you don't engage, and there are always scraps of something someone will say, think actually that might, I quite like that, I'll think about it, I'll go and look into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yes, effectively join, chat, smile, say thank you, and then
Yeah.
leave. You know,
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got to be somewhere for your horse is your hobby. This is a place you go
Mm-hmm.
to in like relax and enjoy and escape, and you don't want
Mm-hmm.
bad feeling at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's very similar to what I tell folks.
Mm,
So in the sense of going back to the horses,
mm,
what are some of the common things that you're seeing come up? Like what makes someone find you and call you out when we'll say they don't have much experience or awareness
mm.
in assessing or understanding any sort of body work in the horse? What are some of the things that you commonly get called out for? And how do you, I know that's a really wide question, but just pick a few things and
So
just some of the stuff that you're seeing, because I think sometimes people feel like as they start to see stuff again, they can get so quickly overwhelmed because it seems like such a foreign world because it's never been discussed, it's never been addressed, it's never been
mm.
recognized. So how do you delve in with a new client and things that you're seeing in horses?
So two main reasons I'll be called in, again being very broad. One is
Mm-hmm.
end of the tether, trying something new. Someone suggested you might be able to help. Rehab is
The
lonely.
last call.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rehab is lonely, isn't it? It's very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other one will be a standard, I need a back person.
Yeah.
It's one
Yeah.
of the two. And actually sit there, my first appointment is always a lot more about talking and looking at the horse than it
Yeah.
actually is about doing anything with the horse.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and finding out actually what is going wrong. Why do you need a back person? What's
Mm-hmm.
happened?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Seeing a lot, again, I feel the same as you said earlier, a lot of it comes in waves.
Mm-hmm.
And the current, what I'm seeing the most of, without a doubt, is kissing spine and suspensory issues.
Oh, oh, yes.
And I'm ruling
Tremendous.
out, within this conversation, I'm ruling out the genetics, right?
Right.
We know
Right.
there's a genetic component that
Right.
can't be helped. And it
Right.
doesn't matter if you do
Right.
everything right. If there's a genetic predisposition and the horse is unlucky, you're going
Yeah.
to have a bad time. But
So
those,
especially with kissing spine, sorry, but I want to dive in here for a minute because this is a big one that so many people are trying stuff, equipment, training, da da da, and nobody's actually looking at the body. And I'm seeing this a lot with the kissing spine that's coming up. Are you finding that often it's taking people a long time to come to the conclusion that it's kissing spine? Because I'm meeting people who for a year, 2 years are searching, and then they're finally coming to this, we'll say, awareness moment of going, well, maybe it's this, and that it once seemed like such a rare occurrence, and now it's just coming up on both coasts when I travel and do clinics. I'm seeing it everywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter, again, the discipline or the type of horse. It's just, what are
everywhere.
you seeing in the UK?
Again, it's absolutely everywhere. And I think,
Yeah.
again, I look back to my early stages of training when I
Yeah.
came into industry, and I was good at staying on. I'm not a particularly great rider, but I could stay
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And and I think, God, all the horses we rode through it, all the horses we made better. I think actually
Yeah.
we just pushed them into learned helplessness. And I look
Oh,
at what they were
absolutely.
doing at that stage, and I think,
Absolutely.
God, that horse is screaming. That was a back problem. I don't
Yeah.
know if it's more obvious now, or actually we just know more now.
Yeah.
And actually it probably is no less prevalent than it was 20 years ago. Just
Yeah.
now,
We're talking
now
about
we're
it.
looking and we're seeing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do find a lot of the time when it's not picked up earlier, it's because things like Sue Dyson's pain ethogram hasn't really like
Mm-hmm.
sunk its teeth in where it needs to yet. But watch young horses being backed and tails are swishing and ears are back, and riding them through it. It's fine.
Yep.
Slow
Yep.
down. If the
Yep.
horse is behaving in a certain way,
Yeah.
why are we just going, well, they're just misbehaving,
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I
We
think
wouldn't.
a big one on the misbehaving, I mean, how people categorize misbehavior
Mm,
is when you're completely surrounded all the time by misbehaving horses and your horse is displaying the same thing. You don't know anything different.
No.
right? Because your horse
Yeah.
looks like everybody else's horse. So why would it be any different? This is what horses do. That's a
Mm.
big one that I find, you know.
Yeah. And countless instructors ride them forwards. If a flight
Hmm.
animal is
More
not going
legs.
forwards, yeah. If a flight animal is not going forwards, you've got a problem.
Yep.
Like that's
Yep.
what horses do. They run. Why
Hmm.
aren't they doing it? What's the problem?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
yes, I find a lot of the time it's getting to the stage where actually the whole body is sore because it's not
Yeah.
being picked up when the horse is going, ew, that twinges.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and why, the back unless you're talking genetics, the back is rarely the
Right.
primary issue,
Right.
you know,
Right.
second or third
Right.
problem down the
Right.
road, where the horse has suddenly carried themselves in an inverted posture. And
Hmm.
we've got this destabilization, this
Hmm.
stagnant coming into the tissues, and the horse can't
Hmm.
use the body properly, and they just compensate. And then actually, I mean, picking out which problem came first at that stage, anybody's guess. But
Yeah.
I think by the time the back is discovered, it's so bad, it's treated because it has
Well,
to be as the primary
yes.
issue, but it's not the
Yes.
primary
But it's
issue.
not. Yes.
No.
Yes.
So you
Yeah.
start by telling this poor upset client, oh my God, my lovely horse is sore, that actually give it 6 weeks and we'll probably start to see the real reason that happened. Like you're going
Hmm.
to go through all of this, you're going to get to this
Yeah.
stage, and then you're going to take 8 steps backwards.
Yeah. Well, and
But
that's the big one.
mm,
That is so hard for people to, well, and there's also the guilt factor. So there's twofold. So one, when we say, okay, we really have to step back. And I always say, it's like the feed bag that has the string in it. You have to pull the end of it to undo, to open it
mm,
up. And that's what a lot of this is like. You start pulling the string and all kinds of things start coming out.
yeah.
And but then the guilt comes in, and
Mm,
it's almost like the human becomes, we'll say, helpless because they
mm,
overwhelm themselves with the guilt of, how did I not know? How did I not see it? My big one is when people come to me and say, why didn't anybody else ever say anything? And we're not talking like backyard riders type of thing. I mean, they're riding under people who should know.
mm,
And that's hard. It's hard to get over the guilt of what we've done with our horses. We've all experienced it. And then, hindsight's 2020, as you have
mm,
some perspective, realizing the level of rehab. And I find with a lot of horses, we can do the physio part, but the number one part is the mental, because if mentally they're not in that available place, I don't find the physio holds the same way, because they're so influential in how that horse is doing things. And if the horse
mm,
is completely defensive towards the human, those postures, those patternized movements where they've learned to protect themselves and awkward and uncomfortable and pain, they'll go there over and over. So the rehab can be really a struggle for the human, I think, as much as it is for the horse, but,
mm,
in many different ways.
mm.
Have you found that at all?
Yeah, and then there's getting across the actually rehab is forever. We don't
Well, yes.
rehab the horse to get back to the competition. Your
Yes.
rehab is forever. These are the
Yeah.
things you have to do now. And
Yeah.
if we're very lucky, we get back to the stage where the horse returns to the previous level of fitness, but you still
Yeah.
have to do the rehab. If you
Yes.
stop, you will end up back where you started.
Yes. Yeah.
So
And so
yeah.
that
Mm,
commitment is so hard, because it is, and I don't know where, and I don't know when it started with this illusion of instant gratification with horses. I think it was about the human emotion and human fulfillment. And so we had this expectation of instant gratification. But to get people to commit to their horse, whether it's in the moment, just getting the human to
mhm,
stay mentally present and available, or whether it's a long-term like rehab and being aware of their horse and being able to hear their horse and believing what the horse is offering, whether or not they understand why yet. That commitment thing is a hard thing in this,
mm,
we'll say, Western society. It
yes.
really is a struggle for people.
Mm,
And I think it's one of the things that really makes, again, as you were talking about earlier, the isolation feel even stronger, we'll say, because when so many others are going, you're still doing what? You're only doing what? How come you're
yeah.
only doing this? Why are you still doing that? Didn't you used to? Blah, blah, blah.
Mm,
That's a challenge for a lot
it
of
is.
owners.
And
Yeah.
everyone does it. Absolutely
Yes.
fine. Back
Yes.
back your horse in 12 weeks. Everyone does it. Yeah.
Yes.
But you're also asking, on the other hand, why there are so many broken horses.
Yes. Yes.
connect. Everyone
Absolutely.
might do it, but that's because the education across the industry still needs, it's not there yet, it's not happened. But in
Yes.
fact, yeah, it's hard. It's hard battling that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is
It is.
turning the everyone does it crowd, but yeah, it's very difficult. So
Well,
we'll,
I struggle. I
mm,
struggle with watching things, on social
mm,
media, the amount that I have to be on here, and
yes,
people are commenting,
mm,
the cliches about look at the bad attitude, oh, typical mayor, oh,
mm,
blah, 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 and all of these sort of what's supposed to be funny or humorous moments of these horses, and all I see is neurotic horses because of the pain,
yep,
and that we're laughing. We're literally laughing as a society, and we've lost the ability to be empathetic to like how many different ways do they have to express they're having a problem before we believe them. For me, that is a struggle. That is
yeah,
very, very hard to see and not to, jump off the deep end all the time and just go, okay, just have to let it go. Those who are interested will come and find you,
mm,
because that's just how they do it. I mean, the horse standing neurotic in the cross ties, bouncing and flipping and pawing and chewing and banging that's just what horses do. And my
yeah,
heart just goes to these horses that, it's like, I'm amazed they put up with as much as they do, really. I
we're
mean,
spoiled. Yeah,
yes.
and
Yeah.
things, people wouldn't do them to their dogs. They wouldn't do
Oh
them to their
no. Oh
cats.
no. No,
But we're
absolutely
quite
not.
happy to do them to our horses.
Yes.
I just, it,
Yeah.
it blows my mind. The disconnect does blow my mind regularly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting, but it's true. It's very true.
Mm.
The different emotions, where one is this emotional connection, I think, with a smaller animal, and the other is coming from an ego place of dominance,
Mm.
really. Even if someone's
Yeah.
not thinking or trying to be aggressive, it's coming from this dominance
Mm.
place.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And an entitlement.
oh
I
yes,
wanted to compete. I bought this horse to compete. So I need
yes.
to get him to a place where we can compete.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I find with people, they will reach out for help, sometimes with the horse, displaying certain behaviors, but really fear. Fear is the biggest motivator that I have found in humans. And it's not until many people have gotten hurt, and I'm talking like in the hospital, punctured lungs, cracked
Mm.
rib, the whole 9 yards, before they go, maybe it's not just behavioral. And it's very
Yes.
interesting that it takes that
Mm.
much, that
Mm.
drastic of a situation, or multiple times, but finally the big one where they
Mm.
go, okay, this is the third time it's happened. I guess something more is going on. And it's really mind blowing where it was like, as they start to play detective and think back and they start to go, he did tell me here, he did do this here, he did do this here, and realizing the whole time the horse was communicating.
Mm. Or
So
if
do
they're
you have
lucky and the
any?
horse hasn't been sold on or
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
worse.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
So, do you have
I
any tips for people who are seeing little behaviors that maybe they're writing off? Like, what are some initial signs that you kind of give people, like, as far as like, hey, you might want to notice, as horses are displaying certain things where there might be something bigger brewing underneath, but it hasn't yet, I'll say, erupted. And again, I say yet. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Are there certain kind of everyday common things that maybe you're finding people are sort of blowing off or not putting value to, but that,
yeah.
you're going, no, the horse is really trying to tell you?
I'm ever the geek, and whenever I do rehab or training plans for people, it's got a reading list at the back, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
on it is always that Sue Dyson course, the pain ethogram.
Mm-hmm.
Because yeah, they're little things, aren't they? They whisper, they
Mm-hmm.
whisper, they whisper, and then they explode. The tail swishing, the ears back, the mouth open. If you're having to strap your horse's mouth shut, or it's grinding their teeth, or
Mm-hmm.
as a physio, the crooked tail. The crooked
Oh,
tail is
yes.
never good. Like,
Oh, yes.
okay, he may always have carried his tail to the left, but then he's always been sore, so
Yeah, yeah,
it's not normal. Um,
yes.
yeah, they're really minor little things. Or, I've got
Mm-hmm.
to have the feet done every 4 weeks because they're always scuffing the toes. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then it's nothing massive. It is the tiny things, the everyday things, or
Mm-hmm.
really grumpy in their stable.
Yeah.
You know, it's those little things. It's nothing massive. Oh, if your horse is tail swishing all the time,
Mm-hmm.
um, there is a reason that they're tail swishing all the time. To be fair, it doesn't always mean orthopedic pain. And
Yeah.
it's always scary when you say these things. Sometimes it is just, I don't understand what you're trying to ask me to do, or I'm not ready to do
Hmm.
that yet. I'm
Hmm.
finding this hard.
Hmm.
And I would have to say that 8 times out of 10, it is something really simple. It's not
Hmm.
some massive rehab journey or rehab job, but
Yeah.
it's the small signs where, you know, they're not grumpy horses. You know, of
Yeah.
course, they have their
Absolutely.
personalities. They are those that, you know, are not as sociable as others or as into people
Yeah.
as others, but yeah,
Yeah.
always bucking into
Absolutely.
canter. That's not really normal.
He
Once
loves
in a
to run.
while, yeah, yeah. Well, I got on them and they just trot off. Okay,
Yeah, it's
that's
just
not great.
amazing.
Um, like, you know, once in a while, of course, they're capable of naughty moments. They have thoughts and feelings and
Yes.
personalities just like the rest of us. And I do believe sometimes they do
Yeah.
things because they find it funny. But if it's regular,
Mhm.
it's probably not
Yes.
bad. If it's at the same
Yes.
cue every time, it's probably not bad,
Mhm.
you know?
Yes. Yes.
So,
Very much.
yeah, it's asking
Yeah.
those questions.
So if people are looking to kind of dive in deeper and educate themselves on the positive note, the power of the internet and things that we can now
Mm.
access that we didn't used to, where are some places that they can learn more, especially in just self-educating, and becoming aware of things that maybe weren't even in their perspective or world or realm
Mm.
or whatnot? Where are some places where maybe people can find some quality information? Again, I know it can very quickly become overwhelming and there's 50 million opinions about everything, but do you have any resources that you suggest, just as sort of an intro into maybe this world of raising the awareness and starting to learn a bit more about what the horse is experiencing, physically and other things going on?
Without a doubt, it's the page I mentioned at the beginning, the Animal Behaviour
Mhm.
and Trauma Recovery Service.
Mhm.
Um, behavioural trainers, page in the
Mhm.
behavioural science. Forget the training, forget the physio,
Mhm.
forget the rehab. Start
Mhm.
understanding your horse. Because that's
Mhm.
if you haven't got a conversation with your horse, you could have
Mhm.
Harry Potter work their magic.
Mhm.
Isn't going to
Mhm.
last. Um,
Mhm.
so you before they tap into anything about how to work the horse to be strong and
Mhm.
improve longevity, start
Mhm.
understanding why the horse is behaving the way they're behaving. Stop labeling the
Mhm.
behavior. Anything that
Yeah.
labels pops you in a box. The second you're
Oh,
in a
yes.
box, you get that's
Oh,
it.
yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah.
And then if
Understand the
people want to
horse.
reach out and in the UK and learn more about you and what you're doing, how do they find you? And I'll put a link down below
Oh,
afterwards.
thank you. The Facebook page is the place at the moment. The Facebook,
Okay.
Instagram, or LinkedIn, for
Okay.
sure. Because
Okay.
yeah, I'm a physiotherapist, a veterinary physiotherapist. I'm
Hmm.
a trainer, but
Hmm.
very much slow from the animal's perspective, and it is
Hmm.
about what I've termed physiotherapeutic work and riding.
Hmm.
We work the horse to make the horse strong, not to do a
Hmm.
job, to make the horse
Hmm.
strong.
Yeah.
And if we do it right and they're lucky and we're lucky and the horse is happy to engage, we get to
Hmm.
do what we bought the horse for, right?
Right.
Which,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And it's always evolving. I mean, it's always
Mm,
evolving in all of this as we become aware, as we become more empathetic, as we see our horse mentally, emotionally, physically change. That's the
mm,
thing that I think people forget because we're often with this like endpoint level of like, was that a success, as opposed to
mm,
it's an ongoing journey. It's not
mm,
about the end point. This will forever evolve. There's always opportunities to refine and improve,
mm,
and I find that's motivation, but for a lot of people it can be really overwhelming. So I try
mm.
and encourage that you don't know where this is leading, and that's the fun part, and
Yeah,
think of how much could come out of this if you commit to this.
yeah.
um yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and why don't lose the little kid that fell in love with horses.
Yes.
We have
Yes.
horses because we love
Yes.
horses. So love
Yes.
them first and everything else
Yes.
second. You know,
Yes.
the enjoyment of the journey is actually being with the horse and
Hmm.
cultivating that relationship and learning about them. It
Hmm.
shouldn't be the result goal that we brought them to achieve. It should be having the
Yeah.
animal with you and wanting to be with you. not there
Yeah.
because they're strapped down or they have to be, but
Right.
actually
Right.
wanting to work with you. That should be
Offering
the
participate.
goal, really.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. This was fun. I'm sure we could talk for hours about lots of things.
Absolutely.
Sorry for the beeping. The trailer's not plugged in, and so that's the alarm going off.
It's-
But, it's always something, right? So I really appreciate it. And again, I'll put links down below of the pages you mentioned, and I'll try and share this to your page. And yeah, maybe we'll chat again sometime. This was really good.
That was great. Thanks so much for having me, Sam.
No problem. Okay, have a good one.
You too. Bye.